Welcome to the WalterFootball.com podcast. This is episode 377. We're going to be previewing the NFC West and the AFC West for the 2022 NFL season. Joined once again by Jacob Camenker from the Sporting News. Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing pretty great. I can't believe it's already time to do some previews here, but that's the time of the year it is in June. Kind of know how everything's played out. Now we just got to prognosticate what it means moving forward. Obviously, stuff will change between now and the start of the season, but for the most part, I feel like you and I both know what we think is going to happen this year. So I'm excited to get down, talk brass tacks about these 8 teams.
Yeah, we've been in lockstep for some of our bets, or actually, I would say most of our bets for the Super Bowl odds and the win totals. But it's not like we've discussed every single team. Like, we're just interested in a handful of teams. So we might have some disagreements, like either today or going forward with our season previews. And you're right; it's weird that we're doing our season previews already. Actually, we were texting yesterday, deciding what to talk about, and I'm like, "Is it too early to do season previews?" It feels like it's too early. But I guess it's never too early to start talking about the previews once the draft is over. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into these 8 teams, and I feel like these are the 2 best divisions in football. So looking forward to discussing them. Before we do, please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video. Visit the link in the description for the merch store. I am wearing, as always, a Walter Football shirt. You can see if you're watching on YouTube. You can own one as well for the price of 4 gallons of gas. So check that out. And I thought we'd begin with the NFC West because the Rams won the Super Bowl. As I pull up the odds there for the division, we'll discuss those at the end. But the Rams are the favorites. As you can see, they're plus 120 to win the division. Obviously, they won the Super Bowl, so you would expect them to be the favorites. Do you believe that the Rams are going to have any sort of regression, or do you think they have a good chance to repeat?
I think they will have some regression, but I still think that they're probably the best team in the division. I think that they're going to face some challenges. I mean, they're in a really tough division. Like, even with the Cardinals and Seahawks looking weaker than they have in the past because they've each lost some key personnel there, those teams still play really hard. But I think the Rams just have the best roster of the bunch. Well, maybe one team can rival them, but I like the roster that they have. I mean, they have Aaron Donald on defense. They've added Bobby Wagner, who's maybe a step slower than he used to be, but they've had a big need at linebacker over the years. So I think he's going to be an upgrade there. So I think that if you just look at their defense, they're going to be really good this year. I know that they've lost some personnel. Darius Williams stands out. But they got Troy Hill back. I thought that was a big deal, getting him from Cleveland a year after they lost him. He should upgrade their secondary. So if you just look at that defense, it's going to be strong. And offensively, as long as you have Sean McVay, you're going to have a solid offense. I mean, he got the most out of Jared Goff. I mean, both you and I, we don't hate Goff, but, there's no pretending like he's among the upper echelon of quarterbacks in the NFL or anything. You can get by with him, but Sean McVay got to a Super Bowl with him. So I think that the fact that Matthew Stafford's there still helps him. He's going into his second year with the team. If he could cut down on those turnovers, the interceptions he led the league in last year, I think he'll be in better shape there. I think he'll have some slightly easier matchups within the division this year, so that should help him out. He also has Cam Akers at his disposal. Akers tore his Achilles last year, somehow made it back for the playoffs. I mean, that was incredible. But having Cam Akers for a full year, provided that he stays healthy, is going to be a big difference maker because they'll be able to trust the run game and not have to go back by committee. They'll have a true 3-down back in Akers. They've added Allen Robinson to replace Odell Beckham Jr., and they still might re-sign Odell. He's just may not be ready to start the season. So I think skill position-wise, they're in good shape. The one question is, how are they going to do on the offensive line? Losing Andrew Whitworth is going to hurt. He was 40, but he was still playing at a pretty high level at left tackle. He wasn't an elite player anymore, but you get by with him as a starter and a veteran leader. So that was huge. They've also lost Austin Corbett, so they're probably going to be relying on a rookie, Logan Bruss, to fill in the right guard position. Joe Noteboom, they re-signed to be the left tackle. He's been there 4 years. He's a former third-round pick as well. He played well in relief of Whitworth last year, so I think he has potential to be a good starter, but there's a difference between filling in really well for a few games and doing it over the course of a season. So if Noteboom pans out, I'm really bullish on the Rams. I think that they'll get to double-digit wins easily and win the division. If they have any sort of problem on that offensive line and Matthew Stafford's under a little more pressure, then maybe one of the other teams in the division could catch them. But given the state of the NFC, I'd be stunned if the Rams aren't a playoff team this year. There just aren't that many teams that can challenge them. They have probably a top 5 roster or pretty close to it in the NFL. So I think that they're in good shape. Do they have a few areas that need to be answered or questions that need to be answered? Yes, but I still think they're the team to beat in this division, albeit not by as much as people might think.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty close, I think, with another team. We'll discuss them in a bit. I don't think the Rams are going to win the Super Bowl this year. We both bet them to win the Super Bowl last year, which was is nice to collect those winnings. But this year, there are a few concerns. You detailed most of them. The offensive line is a concern with Andrew Whitworth gone. Noteboom played well in the playoffs for sure, but that was a small sample size. We'll see if that can continue. I'm not very bearish on the offensive line. I think it'll be okay. It won't be as strong as it was last year, but I think it'll be just like maybe a step down. Which is still fine because they had a great blocking unit last year. Corbett gone too as well. I think Logan Russ could do okay. So we'll see with the offensive line. That's one minor concern. On the other side of the ball in the trenches, they lost Von Miller and they also lost Sebastian Joseph Day. Like those are two very talented players around Aaron Donald. Yeah, Aaron Donald's still there. They're still going to get a ton of pressure on the quarterback with Donald, but their pass rush isn't going to be as great as it was last year. And Von Miller really put that over the top. I think if they didn't have Von Miller last year, I don't think they would have won the Super Bowl. They certainly would have been in the mix for sure. But Miller was such a great presence for them to go along with Aaron Donald. It was just so hard to block those guys. But now they don't have that anymore. So I think that's a minor step backward for them. There are two other worries I have here. One is, they won the Super Bowl, so there might be like, quote unquote fat and happy. Like they may not try as hard. Some of the guys, at least, I'd expect Matthew Stafford and some of the main guys to be on point and everything, but there might be some slacking. It was a long season for them. Teams are going to be gunning for them. Teams watching film on them, like figuring out how to beat them, especially in their conference. So I think that's an issue for them as well. Plus, with Stafford, there's a minor concern that he hasn't been throwing yet. He's had an arm injury. Now, I think that he's going to be okay, but we'll see. I mean, Stafford has been banged up a lot in his career. To his credit, like he always seems to play. Like he's like a warrior, but he may not be 100% to enter the season, or he may get hurt because that tends to happen. So those are the concerns I have with the Rams. I think, like, I agree with what you said. I think they're going to make the playoffs, especially in this week conference. Even the division's strong. I still think they have a good chance to win the division. I would not bet them at the plus 120 that we have here for the Rams. I think we're pretty much in lockstep with the Rams. You mentioned that there's one team that could contend with them. I think we know who that is, but can you confirm?
Yeah, it's the 49ers. I'm pretty sure we both agree that the 49ers are going to be the team that challenges the Rams. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the 49ers, their big question is obviously a quarterback. Like, is Trey Lance going to take that big step forward in his second year? Is he going to be ready to take over for Jimmy Garoppolo? Is he going to beat Jimmy Garoppolo? We assume that, but Garoppolo hanging around is definitely not good for Lance, because if the 49ers are like, hey, like, we're starting to doubt Lance right now, they could start Jimmy Garoppolo to start the season, and then the 49ers ceiling is just much lower with Garoppolo in there. But I like Lance's prospect. I think that he needed time to develop. I had said coming into the draft, he would need probably 2 years before he's a high quality NFL starter potentially. So I think this is probably the time to start him this year and just see, like, hey, you're going to have some growing pains, but they can figure it out along the way because he's got such a good supporting cast. I mean, if you look at the offensive line, it's pretty strong. They lost Alex Mack to retirement, which definitely hurts. But Trent Williams was the best left tackle in the league last year. They always seem to find good interior offensive linemen too. Like Daniel Brunskill's been fine in the past. They picked up Laken Tomlinson. They lost him in free agency this offseason, but they've turned him into a good starter after he was a first-round bust for Detroit. So I trust them to fix up that offensive line with their weak spots. And skill position wise and weapon wise, they look pretty good. Just got to be sure everything with Deebo Samuel is ironed out. I don't think Samuel has the leverage to get out, though. And the 49ers seem willing to pay him. So it might just be as simple as saying, like, hey, we'll limit your carries. We know you don't like that. You think it'll hurt your longevity. You're going to still have to take some, but we'll save them for bigger, more important games and get Ayuk involved in that area. So I think Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch can figure that situation out. And again, I don't think that they're going to be in a situation where Debo forces his way out before this season. But really the defensive side of the ball is where they look really, really good to me. I mean, Nick Bosa is a stud there. You have Eric Armstead up there. Fred Warner is arguably the best linebacker in football right now, true 3-down playmaker. And they always seem to find guys in the secondary to play the cornerback position well. I know they had some issues there last year when they were relying on Richard Sherman. That was either last year or the year before. I can't remember when, but they've had some issues with injuries at the position. But they signed Charvarius Ward from the Chiefs, who has been a terrific player for the Chiefs. True number one type cornerback, not one of the better known players in the league, but always was rock solid in coverage. So thought that was an underrated signing. So was bringing Jason Verrett back. He's always injured, but when he hasn't been injured, he's played as a top cornerback in this league. So having him and Ward and Emmanuel Mosley, I mean, they have a lot of depth there, and they have really good safety play too. So if you just look at this team, they're deep and talented on defense. They have a lot of guys that can play a lot of different roles. We saw it in the playoffs. They limited Aaron Rodgers, granted in a snowstorm, to like 10 points or something like that. Like, that's not easy to do. He's won the MVP twice in a row. So I think the defense is going to be challenged this year and said, hey, we need you guys to play at a really high level to support our young quarterback. And I think they're going to be ready to answer that challenge. I really like D'Amico Ryans. He did a good job of continuing with the work that Robert Saleh did. So I think the 49ers have a pretty high ceiling. I think they'll challenge the Rams for the division. The question is just, can Lance be that next level quarterback? Can he be better than Jimmy G was last year? The potential is there. It's just a matter of whether he can truly reach that potential in his second year.
Yeah, and if Jimmy G ends up starting again, it's not like the worst thing in the world, because, you know, he's taken the Niners to the Super Bowl and the NFC championships in 2 of the last 3 years. So, like, he's proven that he can get the Niners there. Now, you can argue that he was probably a weakness in those games, but at least the Niners will be competitive with him at the helm. But I'd be surprised if Trey Lance doesn't start. The Niners actually excused Jimmy Garoppolo from mandatory practice, which is like a great sign for Trey Lance. And if the Niners are that bullish on Trey Lance's chances of being an upgrade over Jimmy Garoppolo already, then I think that's a great sign for them. It really kind of reminds me of the Patrick Mahomes thing with Alex Smith in his second year. The Chiefs handed Mahomes the reins in his second year. Now, I'm not saying Trey Lance is going to be Mahomes or anything. Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL, but I think Trey Lance is going to be a very good starter at the very least. Like, he has huge upside. And I think that, with the great coaching from Kyle Shanahan, I think that the ceiling is very high for him. So I think that the Niners offense, I feel like, is going to be in good shape, especially with Deebo Samuel coming back. It sounds like Deebo is going to be with the team. You never know. I mean, things could change, but Deebo's been in mandatory practices already, so that's a good sign for him. The one concern you touched on, the offensive line, Alex Mack retiring, is kind of, it's kind of like it really bothers me, because a few weeks ago we were talking about how we like the Niners to maybe win the Super Bowl, and then Alex Mack retires, and it's like I know Alex Mack is not the player he once was with Atlanta, especially during the Super Bowl. I thought he was amazing in that game, but now they're going to have a downgraded center, which is an important position, especially, given that they also lost Laken Tomlinson, like you said. Now that they have some young offensive linemen to take over, so we may not see much of a regression, but still, if I were betting the Niners to win the Super Bowl, I'd be pretty upset that Alex Mack retired. Defensively, they had a couple issues that last year. You mentioned cornerback, and I like the Travarius Ward signing as well. Safety, they lost Jaquiski Tart. They replaced him with George Odom. We'll see what happens there. I'm not a big Odom fan, but I think that he might have some potential. The second concern with the Niners last year was their pass rush, which is kind of weird because they have Nick Bosa and Eric Armstead, but they were 30th in pressure rate, which is really surprising. I think only the Colts and the Falcons had a worse pressure rate than the Niners last year, which is just strange. So that explains why they spent their first draft pick on Drake Jackson. They signed Kerry Hyder. Kerry Hyder is not like a superstar or anything, but he did well with the Niners a couple of years ago, and I think he's going to fit right in and do well. So I think the Niners overall will be better defensively. So if Trey Lance can take a big step forward and be like 75% of what Patrick Mahomes was in his first full year as a starter, I think the Niners have a good chance to win the Super Bowl. But like I said, I'd be upset if I bet them already and I saw Alex Mack retire.
Yeah, if I was the 49ers, I'd be looking at the free agent center market and just saying, hey, like JC Treader is still hanging around out there. Why not bring him in and have him compete with Jake Brendel and Aaron Banks and Spencer Burford and just say, hey, JC Treader, if you play well enough, you can win the starting center job. If not, Banks might move from guard to center or Burford might take the job. So I would feel a lot better about them if they did that. You mentioned the pass rush issue. They definitely had trouble finding guys to get pressure outside of Bosa and Armstead, but they've added a lot of pieces. You mentioned Kerry Hyder. They also signed Camenker Toure. They have Samson Ebukam. They drafted Drake Jackson, like you said. They also have Charles Omenihu, who has a lot of potential. So they have a lot of pieces there that I think they'll find a good rotation. Will they have the exact guy they need across from Bosa? I'm not sure. Maybe if D Ford can stay healthy and get on the field, that would help. But we've kind of been waiting for that for a long time now. And at safety, Odom was a fine signing for me. Like, didn't do a ton for me, but I like Talanoa Hufanga. He had the punt block in the playoffs on special teams. I think he's going to be a good, strong safety at the next level. So I'm hoping he gets a little playing time along with Odom. But they have so many good pieces. Like, this can all come together. Their coaching staff's one of the best in the league too. So I know they're replacing their second coordinator in as many years, but I think that they have enough depth and talent in the coaching staff that they should be in good shape.
Yeah, it's a good point. Also like the idea of signing JC Treader. I think that'd be great for the Niners. If they did that, I'd be on board for betting them right now to win the Super Bowl. I think they're still 20-1. And I was going to bet that, but then Mac retired. I think I was waiting on Deebo Samuel, and then he came back, but then Mac retired like right away. So I think if we see JC Treader signed, or if we get like a better number on the Niners, like maybe 25-1 or something like that, I think I would still bet them. I'm still looking to bet them to win the Super Bowl because I think you said it well. Like this can all come together very well for them, especially if Trey Lance takes a big step, which I think we expect him to do. So the Rams and the Niners were not the only teams to make the playoffs in this division last year. The Cardinals did as well. But, based on our conversations this offseason, we do not expect the Cardinals to do as well as they did last year. Has anything changed for you since we last spoke about them?
No, not really. I'm pretty low on the Cardinals comparatively to what we were very high on them last year. We thought, hey, these guys have Super Bowl potential. They showed it the first half of the year, and then the second half of the year, they just completely collapsed. So I'm definitely not interested in betting them at all. I think they probably missed the playoffs. I'm not sure if Kyler Murray's going to really play. He's going to play hard this year because he needs a new contract, but there's enough tension between him, the coaching staff, and the front office that I'm just worried that the wheels could fall off here a little bit. Like, they start poorly for the first time under Kingsbury. What's to say he's not gone by the time their bye week rolls around? It's just there's a lot of unknowns in Arizona. They've had to lose a lot of talent. They're an old, aging team. Their offensive line still isn't good. There's apparently some worrying Rodney Hudson news. One of our commenters said, I have not heard what that is yet, but that's definitely not a good thing because when he was out last year, that line was much worse. They don't have DeAndre Hopkins the first 6 games. They got Marquise Brown to help there, but I see him more as a Christian Kirk replacement than a true number 1 receiver. I know he has chemistry with Murray from college, but I don't know. It just looks like a lot of these guys really peaked last year. Like James Conner had a great year last year. Will he do that again? I'm not sure. And they lost Chase Edmonds. The line's a problem. The defense is a problem. They still don't have much at cornerback. They took a flyer on Jeff Gladney this offseason. He unfortunately passed away in a car accident, so that was pretty sad. sad news for them. So you wonder if that might affect them too, if the players got to know him at all. So there's not a lot to like about this Cardinals team right now. They have some decent young pieces at linebacker. They still have JJ Watt, but they just don't have enough talent in the secondary to get the job done. And Kyler Murray's still going to be running for his life, and he still hasn't stayed healthy for a full season. So I just can't back them winning this division. I think they probably hover around 500, but they could really fall on either side of the coin. It wouldn't surprise me to see them go 7-10. They just have so many tough opponents they have to play this year.
Yeah, the Rodney Hudson news was that he's not in mandatory minicamp right now, and there's speculation that he may retire. So the Cardinals have lost some key players already this offseason. I guess sort of counting DeAndre Hopkins, who's not going to be playing the first 6 weeks. They got Marquise Brown to kind of fill his spot, but I mean, Brown's a good player, but he's not DeAndre Hopkins. So I think we're on the same page with the Cardinals as well, which is a shame because we loved them last year. I ended up getting them at 50-1 to win the Super Bowl at Circa when I was in Vegas in July. And I felt great about it because they were 7-0 to start the year. My father-in-law's brother, he bet them as well because he follows whatever I do. So he bet the Cardinals as well. And I saw him when they were 7-0. He's like, yeah, well, let's go. Like, this is great. And then in the span of 4 days, they lost JJ Watt, Kyler Murray, and DeAndre Hopkins to injury. So it kind of fell apart for them. And, that kind of goes along with what you were saying about Kyler Murray not playing a full season. He hasn't done that yet. You can't really trust him to do that. Heading into last year, it was only 2 seasons. And you're like, okay, maybe he can survive a full season, given that they improved their offensive line, especially with Rodney Hudson. I mean, that was a big addition for them last year, and now that's not the case. Hudson may not play, so you have to wonder how Murray is going to survive a full year if Hudson's out and Justin Pugh's at center, which doesn't sound good to me. Defensively, you lose Chandler Jones. That's enormous. I think we're talking about that last year at this time. That's one of the reasons why we love the Cardinals so much, is because the Cardinals were good in 2020, and then they lost Chandler Jones to injury, and their defense kind of fell apart. And then Murray got hurt, and that added to their misery. With Jones out, like, you have to wonder where their pressure is going to come from. You mentioned obviously they have JJ Watt there, but he's an aging player. He tends to get banged up, so we don't know if he's going to be 100%. So they may not have much of a pass rush. And then when you add on top of that, there are issues in the secondary, like you said. I just don't know how they're going to be competitive with the Rams and the 49ers. Now, it's a weak conference, so they could still make the playoffs. I won't discount that. I just think it's going to be tough for them to get there. You mentioned their schedule is very difficult. So I think they probably end up going 7-10, 8-9, and miss out in playoffs.
Yeah, it sounds like we're on the same page here. I'm just not pleased with how they addressed their needs this offseason too. Like, they had a lot of them and they didn't have a lot of money. So I understand that they couldn't really do much in free agency, but in the draft, they just kind of went after guys to replace Chandler Jones. Like, they drafted Myjai Sanders and Cameron Thomas, and that could pay off long-term, but those are a couple of third-round guys that are going to have to really supplement that pass rush right away. I'm not sure they're ready to do that. And then they spent a pick on Trey McBride, who I like as a prospect, as a tight end, but they had just re-signed Zach Ertz to stay with the team. So it's kind of like, do you really need 2 tight ends at this point? I get it. You probably do, but this team runs a lot of 4 wide receiver sets. I think more than any team in the league. So I just didn't understand that move entirely. I would have done more to upgrade the secondary. They spent 1 draft pick, I think, on the secondary, and it was a 7th rounder. So, I mean, that's not the best way to tackle your biggest issue, especially since Chandler Jones' absence is going to make the secondary issue even more glaring. So, yeah, I'm pretty low on the Cardinals this year. I think that they're going to have to undergo some changes after this campaign. We were wondering last year, would Cliff Kingsbury survive that late season collapse? So, I mean, we've been proven wrong before. I said before last year, I think I was like, Zach Taylor is really on the hot seat. That aged like milk. So we'll see if this one ages like milk. But the seat is definitely warm for Cliff Kingsbury. So they got to start and finish well this year.
It's true. Yeah, good point about Zach Taylor. I guess you never know, but with Kingsbury, it's like how many times can he call deep passes on third down? It's so frustrating. I saw I think it was Pro Football Focus. They made a poll saying like Kingsbury is the fourth best coach in the NFL or something like that. And like he's closer to fourth worst coach than fourth best coach. I don't know what they were thinking. And with the pass rush, you mentioned that they got Majai Sanders and Cameron Thomas in the third round. But even if they had spent a first round pick, like if they stayed at 23 and took Jermaine Johnson or George Karlaftis, like would you be confident that one of them could replace Chandler Jones's production? Like I wouldn't, like maybe long term, but definitely not this year.
Be more confident than the 2 third-rounders probably, but it wouldn't be enough to be like, oh yeah, like they definitely got their replacement for Chandler Jones. I think more at issue here is they spent a second-round pick on a tight end who might not be your starter, and if he is your starter, then you wasted a lot of money on Zach Ertz. So it's like you pick one or the other. You could fill in with other tight ends. There are always good tight ends around the league that you could pick up.
Yeah, and even if you want to run 2 tight end sets, you have Max Williams as well. Like he did well for them last year until he got hurt. So I really don't understand that pick. Yeah, it was bizarre. So let's get to the last team in this division, the Seahawks. We both don't expect them to be competitive. But are they like one of the worst teams in the NFL, or do you think they could win like 5 or 6 games?
I think they stand a chance of winning 5 or 6 games. I think their absolute ceiling as currently constructed would be 7, and they'd have to get really strong performances out of the team outside the quarterback position. When they first traded Russell Wilson, I was like, this team's not going to be good at all. Like I was just writing them off. The more you look at them, they do have quality skill position weapons. They have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Rashad Penny looked good last year, and they have Kenneth Walker now. So got a couple good running backs. And Pete Carroll, we know he loves his ground and pound football. And they drafted Charles Cross to help out there. Their offensive line for the first time in a while actually doesn't look bad. They drafted Abraham Lucas, another tackle, who I think could end up being a starter. I believe he has a good, so there's a certain time he has in the cone drills that demonstrates that he should be a better than expected pass blocker. I think he ran them really fast, and like tackles that have run at a certain speed have all turned into quality starters. So long story short, I think they added 2 quality starting tackles, and their interior line isn't that bad. So they have Damian Lewis, Austin Blythe, Gabe Jackson there. So all of a sudden the offensive line's not looking as bad. It's the quarterback position that's a question. I wouldn't trust Drew Lock as far as I can throw him, but I think he has more upside than Geno Smith. So I think Lock will end up being the starter, and hey, we'll see what ends up happening. John Schneider really liked Drew Lock when he was drafted. We'll see if the Seahawks and Shane Waldron can get more out of him. Defensively, they don't have as many big names. They don't have Bobby Wagner anymore, so people will probably think, oh, their defense isn't that good, but they still have some underrated playmakers. In the secondary, Trey Brown last year, when he played that as a rookie corner, they were really solid on defense. He had some injury issues and wasn't able to play, but I think that he has the makings of a solid starting corner. I hate that they lost DJ Reed. That really is going to hurt their secondary, which is one of their biggest weaknesses. But their front 7 is okay. They have some people that can generate pressure. Darrell Taylor, Jordan Brooks, Cody Barton, and Uchenna Nwosu are kind of a good linebacker core, and Taylor's a hybrid Leo defensive end linebacker type. So I like what they have up front. There are a lot of questions that they have to answer in the back end. But I like some of the draft picks they made. Tariq Woolen has athleticism for days. So does Boye Mafe. And Kobe Bryant, to me, seems like a guy who is going to turn into a solid, either starting number 2 corner or maybe a good nickel. So I think they have potential there. It's just coaxing it out of this team and getting their veteran players to play at a really high level while they figure things out. So do I think this team's going to the playoffs? Definitely not with their quarterback situation. But I think they're going to be a tougher test for teams than people realize. I think that's going to make them a nice value play early in the season. What I'm hoping is the Broncos crush them in week 1 and everyone says, oh, the Seahawks are bad. They lost to a Broncos team that weirdly some parts of the public are low on because they think Russell Wilson isn't good anymore. But I think best case scenario, they get crushed week 1 and then we can kind of say, hey, they shouldn't be like 10-point underdogs in whatever their week 2 game is.
Yeah, I think we agree that, they're not as bad as the Texans or, I feel like the Bears are, they might be the worst team in the NFL. I think the Seahawks are better than the Bears. I think they're better than the Falcons. So, at the very least, you could say that they're the fourth worst team in the NFL. But I think they have a chance to win 5 or 6 games. It wouldn't surprise me if they won 3 or 4. Like if they lost a bunch of close games and they suffered some injuries, I think things could go south for them, just because they don't really have much going on. Like they have some good players for sure, but they don't have like the elite upside outside of like Metcalf, and like Shelby Harris, obviously. But they lost a lot of talent too. They lost Dwayne Brown and Brandon Shell. Like I like their new tackles. I was pretty high on both of them entering the draft, but they're both rookies, and you have 2 rookie tackles. Like that could be problematic. Like their offensive line still has to gel. We have to see what happens with their pass rush. Uchenna Nwosu and Shelby Harris should be good. But then again, I don't know. Like Shelby Harris is now in his 30s. Uchenna Nwosu, like, is he a number 1 edge rusher? Like definitely not. So they have some good talent there. Like Bobby Wagner's gone. That's an issue. You mentioned DJ Reed leaving as well. That's a problem. It sounds like Kobe Bryant, who you mentioned, sounds like there's a good chance he's going to be a starter, which like I can't decide if that's good or bad, because it could be good that he's like really talented in camp so far, or it could be bad that they don't really have anyone else outside of Trey Brown. So I'm not really sure about that. Quarterback, obviously a big concern. Now they could still trade for Baker Mayfield, less likely Jimmy Garoppolo because he's in the division, although that could still happen. I remember McNabb going from Philly to Washington, so it could definitely happen. So if they get an upgraded quarterback, I'd be more willing to say that they're going to be competitive. Like if they get Baker Mayfield, I think they could make the playoffs. If they stick with Drew Lock or Geno Smith, I think 5 or 6 wins is probably the ceiling for them. But like I said, if they suffer some injuries, I don't like their depth very much. So they could really, just maybe win 3 games. I think that's probably the worst case scenario. So I'd say anywhere between 3 and 6 wins.
Yeah, they definitely have some depth issue. Like they have a lot of players I like. I think the issue is they don't have like true high end players at a lot of positions. So if they get, if you get hurt and then your depth gets worse, and then from there you just keep spiraling into worse and worse players. So I think that really brings down the overall talent level of the roster. One thing I will say about Kobe Bryant being projected to start, we've seen the Seahawks have a lot of success with round 4 and round 5 cornerbacks, like probably more than any team in the NFL in recent years, at least since Richard Sherman. They know how to scout the secondary. We saw it with Trey Brown last year. So I'm confident that if Kobe Bryant is starting, it's for a good reason. But I can understand the apprehension, because if he's out on the field, it's like, all right, he has no idea what he's doing. And then it's like, okay, well, who else do they have that he's playing in front of that were so bad that he had to see the field? So yeah. But I liked Kobe Bryant a lot. I had him as a top 100 guy. And Tariq Woolen is just so athletic. So I'm excited to see how they use this guys. I'm weirdly excited to see what the Seahawks team can do. Like I find them very interesting because they could be just absolutely terrible, but there's also a chance that they're like kind of like the Lions were last year, and that you look at the roster, you're like, oh, this isn't a great roster, but they may keep games closer than people realize.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely if they had something at quarterback of substance. Like we've seen Drew Lock before. He sucks. Like I don't know. John Snyder may have liked them entering the draft, but I think we've seen enough of him to know that he's not a good quarterback. Like if they had, like for example, if they had Trey Lance for just to say, like, and we had no idea what this guy would do. Like Trey Lance, I think we like him because he's with the Niners, and he has upside, and it's a good coaching staff. But with Seattle, it's like less. Like they don't have a Kyle Shanahan there. Like they just want to run the ball, and like we wouldn't know. But if they had like a huge question mark at quarterback, we had no idea. I think I'd be really interested in what Seattle would do. It's just like their upside is just capped with Drew Lock. It's just a shame for the rest of the players, because they have good players on their team, but like I was saying, they just don't have the depth. And they don't have like a lot of top end guys. And there's also a chance that DK Metcalf could be traded still. So Yeah, I would not go over the win total with Seattle anytime soon. So speaking of bets, I have these on the bottom of the screen. If you're watching YouTube, if you're not, I'll read them out. To win the division: Cardinals plus 316, Rams plus 120, Niners plus 200, Seahawks plus 1108. Would you bet any of these?
I would strongly consider the 49ers plus 200 just because, like you mentioned, the Rams might not be as hungry this year. They've lost some talent, but I think public perception of the Rams is that they haven't lost any talent. I think there was an article, I can't remember what website on it, but they wrote power rankings. They were like, the Rams are basically running back their whole team this year. And it's
Yeah,
like,
it was
well,
CBS. Yeah.
oh, it's CBS. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll cut them some slack because, yeah, you've got a lot of guys coming back, but you're still losing Von Miller and a few other really key guys like Andrew Whitworth. So, I mean, even if most of the team's coming back, those are hard to replace. So, I think the Rams are probably the team that will most likely win the division. But the best bet here is the 49ers, because if you were to tell me right now, if you were to come from the future and say, Jacob, hey, the 49ers won the division this year, it would not surprise me at all. So, getting them at a 2-1 value is not bad. I don't know if I'd bet it right now. I might wait a month to see how things develop on their offensive line scenario and just, be sure that Deebo Samuel isn't going anywhere. Like, I really don't think he will, but you never know. Sometimes maybe some deal comes along. They're like, hey, we aren't keeping him beyond this year, and this amazing package came along. We have to take it. But the 49ers are the team to bet here, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. A good point on Samuel as well. I think you might want to wait on that. Not just this, but also for the Super Bowl odds. Yeah, I think the Niners are the best value here. They could easily win the division. And you're right. I mean, if you were to say the Rams won the division, you'd not be surprised. If the Niners won the division, you'd not be surprised. But I would be surprised if the Cardinals won the division, and obviously Seattle. Like, don't bet Seattle plus 1108, even though it's a high number. I think I would only bet the Niners and Rams. And I think what I would do is I would try to get maybe a plus 250 on the Niners. And maybe early in the season, if the Rams lose their opener against Buffalo and the Niners look really impressive against Chicago, which I think is going to happen, you could see those odds kind of come close together. Like the Rams might heading into week 2, the Rams might be plus 160, plus 170. And then you could bet that as well. And you would have both teams and you'd be guaranteed to get money either way. Now you're guaranteed to get money now, but the upside isn't there with the plus 120. So I think I would wait on the Rams. It's kind of what I did last year with the Titans and the Colts. I think I bet the Titans when the Colts had injury issues, and then I bet the Colts as a hedge once they started slowly, and it worked out. So I think that's what I would do here. Let's move on to the other West division, the AFC West. The Chiefs have been running this division for a long time. They are the favorites, as you can see on the screen there. They're plus 168. So do you think they're going to repeat as divisional champs?
I think they could. This is the hardest division to predict in football. This is a scenario where you could list these teams in any order, any of the 4 teams, and you could say, this is how the division finished. And I'd look at it and be like, yeah, I can understand how that would happen. So, I mean, I think the Raiders are probably going to finish last. Spoiler alert. I think a lot of people do. But the other 3 teams, they could really come in whatever order. Currently, I do not have the Chiefs winning the division. I like them a lot. And I actually really like what they did this offseason. The number one thing they did is the thing that's at the forefront of most people's minds. They traded Tyreek Hill. So that has led to some sentiment of the Chiefs aren't going to be as good this year. I don't buy into that narrative. I think that, hey, are they going to be as good offensively without Tyreek Hill? Are they going to be as explosive? Probably not. I mean, Tyreek Hill is one of the most explosive receivers in the game. But they still have guys that can replace that speed element, and Mecole Hardman and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. And I'm not saying those guys are Tyreek Hill or anything. They're not going to have the same production as him. But the fact of the matter is they have good depth at receiver. Sky Moore could be a good player for them. Juju Smith-Schuster has had some bad years in Pittsburgh, but maybe finally with a quarterback who can throw the ball more than 5 yards downfield, he'll look a little bit better. And Travis Kelce is still there. So there are plenty of weapons on the offense. We saw them remake the line last year. Patrick Mahomes is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. That's also what this boils down to. He's going to be able to get the most out of his receivers. So I think they're going to be very strong on offense. Maybe not as strong as they once were, but I still trust them to get double-digit wins. Defensively, they've done a really good job of kind of under the radar, adding a lot of talent. Getting George Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie in the first round of the draft. A lot of people were focused on, hey, they didn't get a receiver. What are they doing? But they've upgraded their pass rush with Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie. We've seen Andy Reid have success with Washington corners before. Marcus Peters turned into an interception machine in Kansas City. McDuffie was one of the soundest cover corners in the draft this year. They needed someone to replace, oh my goodness, Charvarius Ward. I almost forgot his name, even though we were already talking about him. And I think McDuffie will help with that. So they always have this collection of guys in the secondary that you're like, I don't know if I really know this guy, but he plays well. And I think they're going to be in good shape there. So they should only get better on defense. They were better last season after they traded for Melvin Ingram. They started the year poorly. They benched Daniel Sorensen, traded for Melvin Ingram. Now they don't have to worry about any of that. They have a lot of young talent that side of the ball. So I think their defense is going to be sneaky good this year. People aren't going to realize it. And offensively, the Patrick Mahomes factor is a big thing. So I love the Chiefs this year. I think they're going to win double digits easily with Andy Reid. I think they go over their win total. I have them at 12-5, and I have them finishing second in the division.
Okay, so I think they could definitely go 12-5, maybe even 13-4. I think something like that. It's in the range. I mentioned last week that they've gone over the win total in all but 1 year that Andy Reid has been in Kansas City. And as long as Andy Reid has Patrick Mahomes, they're going to be in Super Bowl contention. He was they would go to the playoffs with Alex Smith every year, and now they have Patrick Mahomes. Tyreek Hill gone. That's going to stop a lot of people from betting them. But like you said, I mean, they're not as top heavy at receiver, but they have a lot more depth now. We'll see what happens to Juju Smith-Schuster. He had a great start to his career, and he was kind of stricken with Ben Roethlisberger and his noodle arm. And I feel like he can make resurgence there. Marcus Valdes-Scantling has reportedly looked good with Patrick Mahomes in camp, so that's someone to look out for, maybe in fantasy. So I think he has upside. And then Sky Moore, you mentioned all these guys. I think that the Chiefs offense, I don't think maybe they take a step down, but even that is still really good. So the Chiefs, the offense should still be fine. Defensively, going to the draft, you're kind of concerned. They lost Melvin Ingram, they lost Charvarius Ward. How are they going to replace these guys and get a receiver? And they did that, with the two guys you mentioned, Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie. We'll see how they do. I mean, the rookies, we obviously don't know how they're going to play right away, but I like both of them heading into the draft. So I'm pretty confident that they're going to have at least some positive moments in the rookie year, especially McDuffie. I think he went way too late. I thought he could go in the teens. So I like what the Chiefs have done, and like I said, as long as they have Patrick Mahomes, they're going to be in Super Bowl contention. It's just a tough division, and I think Pat was saying in the comments that he would not bet the Chiefs at plus 168. It's just no value there. I would agree, even though I think the Chiefs have a good chance to win this division. Plus 168 is not really what you're looking for in terms of value, but still, I think I think there's definitely a good chance that they win this division. But like you said, you had them second to win the division. I think I also have them second. I have to check my overall standings, but I think they're going to be first, second, or third. I would not expect them to be last unless Mahomes gets hurt.
Yeah, that's basically what it boils down to. If Mahomes is healthy, they're going to finish top 3 in this division and could win it. I agree. I'm not going to bet this right now because we saw last year the Chiefs started slowly and then really put it together and got red hot late in the season. I'm not saying that's going to happen this year, but they don't have the easiest start in the world. I forget who they play week 1, but week 2 they have a short week against the Chargers. So that could prove to be a tough game. If they lose that and they don't look as good as people think in week 1, their numbers to win the division will naturally lengthen because they'll be losing to the Chargers anyway if that happens. So I would wait on that. But yeah, I agree with you. I wouldn't bet them at this number exactly.
Yeah, they play Arizona week 1, and okay. we both expect them to cover that. We talked about the week 1 spreads a couple weeks ago, and Arizona is weaker this year, especially with no Hopkins in week 1. I think the Chiefs have a good chance, and Andy Reid having extra time to prepare. But they could lose to the Chargers in week 2, and that could lower their odds. Pat's saying that double-digit spreads in division games are gone. It's a good point. There are no easy games anymore. Although they almost lost to Denver late in the season last year, and they did lose to the Chargers in, I think it was week 3 of last year. So it's not like they had easy games last year. And the Chiefs tend to own the Raiders, so I would expect them to sweep the Raiders. And at the very least, I think they split with the Chargers and the Broncos. So going 4-2 in the division, I think would still allow you to go over the win total. And also remember, with the 17th game, divisional games mean a little bit less than they did in the past. So I think I'm with you. I think I have them winning 12 games off the top of my head. So you mentioned that you have the Chiefs second. So who do you have winning the division?
Yeah, I have the Chargers winning the division right now. I mean, again, this is a situation where you could tell me the Chiefs, the Chargers, you could tell me one of them's going to win the division. Wouldn't surprise me either way. But I think the Chargers are going to be hungry this year because they missed out on the playoffs in the worst possible fashion. All they needed to do was tie, and their coach called a timeout, and Rich Bisaccia said, hey, if you didn't call the timeout, I would have just ran out the clock. We would have both went to the postseason. So Brandon Staley's going to have spent the whole offseason being like, man, I really screwed that up. And the Chargers players will be like, man, I can't believe we lost to the Raiders and the Texans. Like, they have all these like really bad losses down the stretch, and they're going to want to bounce back from that. So they have the natural motivation, and they also have just a significantly better roster at this point. Their offense is largely the same as it was last year. The big changes, they've added Boston College Eagles Zion Johnson to start at right guard for them. That's why I'm wearing the shirt. That's not actually why I'm wearing the shirt, but figured I'd mention it. And I think he's going to be a plug and play starter at the next level. Was he the greatest value at 17? No, but I still like him a lot as a prospect. So really offense, their only hole is at right guard where you're starting Storm Norton, who's nothing special. So I would look to try to get an upgrade there in free agency with whoever's still available. Just bring in some veteran competition. But aside from that, you have one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL, plenty of skill position weapons. Austin Eckler, you drafted Isaiah Spiller, so that looks good. But defensively is really where they made their upgrades. They brought in Austin Johnson, Sebastian Joseph Day to upgrade their run defense, which is a big part of the reason they lost to the Texans last year. They added Khalil Mack via trade. He's going to be a true complement to Joey Bosa. That could potentially be a nightmare for opposing defenses if Mack can stay healthy. And I know he's in his 30s, but even if he regresses, he's going to get less attention given to him because of Joey Bosa. So it's really a winning formula there. They also signed Kyle Van Noy and Troy Reeder to upgrade their linebacker core. No, Kenneth Murray was hit or miss last year. He had some rough moments, so they'll probably take some snaps from him. And Van Noy can play any linebacker position. Then the secondary, you have J.C. Jackson joining the team. He was a true number one cornerback for the Patriots. They call him Mr. Interception for a reason. So more turnover potential there. Asante Samuel's in another year. Michael Davis is there too. He's been good. And they signed Bryce Callahan. And if he could stay healthy, he's going to be a good nickelback. So there is just a lot to like about this Chargers team. They really have one hole, and it's at right tackle. That's my opinion. Maybe it takes time for their defense to gel. Maybe they run into some unexpected problems in special teams. We know the Chargers have a long-term cursed history with kickers, but they seem to fix that with Dustin Hopkins last year. So I love the Chargers. I think they're going to respond really well to this season. They're motivated. They're more talented. And, yeah, they have a tough schedule and play in a really tough division. But they've been competitive with the Chiefs in the past, and they've beaten the Broncos and Raiders as well. So I think that they could really, if they win that week 2 game against the Chiefs, or at least give them a really good run for their money, they could ride a wave of momentum early in the season and kind of cruise atop the division the whole year and then end up in first place. So I really like them this year. I think Justin Herbert has a really good shot at MVP.
Yeah, I think he does as well. I love this team too. They're third in my power rankings, so I definitely could see them winning the division and the Super Bowl. There's a lot to love about the Chargers. Justin Herbert, like the only knock on him is you could maybe say is that he doesn't handle the blitz as well as it's like Joe Burrow does right now, and like obviously comparing them because they're from the same draft class. But with another season, I think you'd expect them for him to be better, especially with an offensive line upgrade like with Zion Johnson. Right tackle, as you said, the only weakness on the offensive line. But I thought Trey Pipkins like played okay down the stretch last year, so like maybe they go with him him instead of Storm Norton. We'll see. I'm sure they'll compete for that job. But I think that the Chargers offense is definitely one of the best in football. I think Mike Williams will not take a step back. Like I've seen some speculation that Williams, he kind of struggled early in his career to meet the expectations of a top 10 pick. And then he just broke out last year. The reason he broke out last year is because they had a really improved offensive line. So Justin Herbert had time to go downfield instead of just checking down to Eckler and Keenan Allen. And that's why Mike Williams outproduced Allen. And I would expect that to continue. So I really like what the Chargers are going to be doing offensively. And you mentioned all the great upgrades they made defensively. Like, how do you block Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack? That's insane. Like, yeah, you could say Khalil Mack isn't what he once was back in 2018 when he led the Bears to that divisional or I should say playoff win or almost playoff win. The double doink kind of foiled that, but they should have won that game. He's not maybe the same player as he was back then, but he's still a really talented guy, and he's not the number one edge rusher anymore, which is kind of insane. So you have to wonder how the opposing teams are going to block them. And also Sebastian Joseph Day is like a really good interior defensive lineman. So I love that upgrade as well. They're definitely going to be better against the run. They made Rex Burkhead look like the second coming of Earl Campbell in that loss to the Texans that you mentioned. So with that and Kyle Van Noy, JC Jackson, Bryce Callahan, we'll see if Callahan can stay healthy. But I think, you're not really banking on that if you're the Chargers. I feel like even if Callahan misses the entire year, like they're still going to be better in the secondary. And whatever they can get from Callahan is going to be a bonus. I love this team. I bet them to win the Super Bowl already at 25-1 odds. I think they're like 15-1 now, which is like not as appealing, but I still think that they're not a bad bet at 15-1. So that's how much I like the Chargers. So like we're definitely on the same wavelength here.
Yeah, I would say 15-1. I would be torn on betting that just because if they lose to the Chiefs in week 2, the number might drop to 18 or something.
Yeah.
Even if they look good. But yeah, there's just so much to like. This team is one of the deepest in the NFL too. You just look at every position. They have guys that you're like, yeah, I'd be comfortable if this guy needed to start some games, or I'd be comfortable if this guy got hurt and missed the season. You could put him in. I think one interesting position to watch from fantasy perspective, tight end. They signed Gerald Everett, but they have Donald Parham there, and Parham proved to be a really good red zone weapon last year at 6'9". If he can improve his hands, he might end up being a sneaky good pick late in best ball drafts, or some guy you could scoop up off the waiver wire if he looks good in the preseason. So I'd keep an eye on their tight end situation because whoever it is will end up catching a lot of touchdowns, I think.
Yeah, I like that. I always tend to play matchups for tight ends. So, I mean, if the Chargers are in a good matchup, definitely Parham is someone to look at. Denver, I feel like, is the other team that we expect to finish in the top 3 of this division. Although, like you said, they can go in any order. So if Denver won the division, neither of us would be surprised. So, why do you like the Broncos?
I mean, it's all about Russell Wilson, right? Like I've heard too much chatter, and this might just be from some of my coworkers who are lower on the Broncos than I am, but I've heard a lot of chatter that's like, oh, the Broncos aren't good. Why did they trade for Russell Wilson? He doesn't make them a contender. And I hear that and I'm like, are you guys sure about that? Like, I get it. I get Russell Wilson had a rough year last year, but he had a finger injury that he came back from way too early. He needed to be out 6 weeks instead of 3. And if he had done that, he probably wouldn't have looked bad for a few games. He just couldn't really feel his hand, I think, or his middle finger, which really hurt his ability to throw the ball. So Russell Wilson is still an elite quarterback in this league, but he's not like Aaron Rodgers level, but you can win a Super Bowl with him. And the Broncos supporting cast is pretty strong. I mean, their offensive weaponry from Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Jerry Jeudy, I mean, those guys are really talented. They just haven't had a good quarterback to work with yet. I liked Teddy Bridgewater when he was there. He did a good job, but Teddy Bridgewater is limited in what he can do. He's more of a low-end starter, high-end backup that, hey, if you need to start him to start half a season, hey, he can keep you afloat. But now they're getting a guy who can legitimately help carry a team to a Super Bowl. So I'm excited to see what he can do. I know that they've lost Noah Fant on offense, but they have Albert Okwuegbunam and they drafted Greg Dulcich at tight end. So they have enough talent pass catcher wise to get the job done there. They have 3 great running backs really, and Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon, and Mike Boone's nothing to sneeze at as a third guy. He's had some decent games in the NFL too. So I think Russell Wilson, so long as he stays healthy, and he has for literally every season except last year, I think the Broncos offense is going to be firing on all cylinders. Maybe it takes them some time to develop chemistry. Maybe the offensive line isn't as good as you might like it to be, but I think they have enough pieces up there to do a solid job. And defensively, their defense is pretty amazing. Vic Fangio had them playing at a really high level. People forget the Broncos went 7-10 last year with Drew Lock as their starter. Like, I feel like if you told people that, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, that sounds right." But then it'd also be like, "But what if they didn't have Drew Lock? How many more wins do you think they have between if you put Russell Wilson on that team, say he's healthy the whole year, and say Drew Lock didn't have to start? People would probably be like, "Oh yeah, well Russell Wilson's probably worth at least 3 wins, maybe 4." And then you're getting into 10-7, 11-6 territory, and that's a potential playoff team in the AFC. And they've only gotten better on defense, too, because they've signed K'Wan Williams, Randy Gregory. They're getting healthier, too. I know that they've had some players that missed time. I know Josie Jewell was one of them. I think Bradley Chubb missed some time. They traded Von Miller midseason, so they had to kind of account for that. They also signed DJ Jones, who's a really solid defensive tackle. I always play as him in Madden because I need to control someone that doesn't have as big of an impact on the play, but he's much better in real life than he is in Madden. I will say that. And yeah, they just have great defensive depth. Their secondary is really intimidating to throw on with Pat Surtain, Ronald Darby, K'Wan Williams, Justin Simmons, and Kareem Jackson. So, I mean, if they can have a better pass rush this year with Gregory there, look out. They're not going to allow that many points. Russell Wilson's going to have plenty of time to get the ball to his receivers. So this team could be really good. The only reason I have them in third place is because I think it might take them some time to gel. And I think their offensive line does have some questions. I think they're solid enough, though, that they can make a playoff appearance and potentially make a deep, deep postseason run.
Yeah, this reminds me of the Buccaneers heading into 2020 because, we were looking at them as I forget what the record was. I think they were like 7-9 or something like that the year before they got Tom Brady. And we're like, okay, how many wins is Jameis Winston going to Tom Brady? And it ended up being obviously a Super Bowl victory. So like that was quite the upgrade. And, Winston is, he gets a lot of flack a lot, but he's definitely better than Drew Lock. I think we can definitely say that. So going from Lock to Russell Wilson, I think you can maybe even say is greater than Winston to Brady. Obviously, Brady, the best quarterback of all time, and he's better than Russell Wilson. But I think that Drew Lock is just significantly worse than Jameis Winston. So it's a huge upgrade, and it's a great point that they went 7-10. Obviously, they're going to do a lot better with Russell Wilson, and I'd be shocked if they win fewer than 10 games. I think 10-7 is probably, barring injury, but 10-7 is probably their floor. I expect Russell Wilson to play a lot better in Denver. He won't be stricken with that bad coaching staff that keeps running the ball nonstop. Although Denver can run the ball with Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. But with Wilson behind a decent offensive line, throwing to a lot of talented receivers, Cortland Sutton's going to be healthier than he was last year because he's not coming off a torn ACL again. We'll see what happens to Jerry Jeudy. But even if he is doesn't stay out of trouble, they still have Tim Patrick, Akawegbenam, as you mentioned, tight end. That's a solid target to throw to. So I really like their offense and defense. Defensively, they had some issues last year because they lost their 2 top linebackers. I think in the first 3 weeks of the season, and they're getting Josie Jewell back. They signed Alex Singleton, who's not good in coverage, but he's a solid 2-down linebacker. So you can only have him on the field for the first 2 downs. Randy Gregory, not Von Miller, but he's going to be a good edge rusher for them across from Chubb. And then you mentioned K'Wan Williams going into that talented secondary. I love the Broncos this year. I think I can't remember if I have them second in the division or if I have the Chiefs second, but I think they're definitely in the running to win the division or to finish second in the division. They could definitely win the Super Bowl this year. We both bet them to win the Super Bowl this year before Russell Wilson got there, 22-1. And I think they're like 18-1 now, or maybe even 20-1. I think they're a great bet to win the Super Bowl right now. So yeah, another team we love in this division.
Yeah, the one thing I'm interested to see in the way that they differ from the Buccaneers and the Rams is that the Broncos have a new head coach coming in. So The Buccaneers had Bruce Arians established there for a couple of years before. The Rams obviously had Sean McVay, so they were able to take in the new quarterback and kind of implement things, work the system around them, and make everything work. Nathaniel Hackett's going to have a tall task of making this all work from the jump while he's trying to start his coaching career. But I like Hackett, and he comes with Aaron Rodgers' endorsement. So you can't really go wrong with that. But it will be interesting to see how they do in the first month and a half of the season. If they're 3-3 after 6 weeks, I'm not going to panic or anything or push the panic button on them. But I guess that's my way of saying don't be surprised if they come out of the chute a little slower, because Hackett's going to be learning on the job a little bit, and Russell Wilson's going to be learning how to connect with his guys. So that's the one concern I have with them. But the rest of their roster, I mean, this roster is loaded.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good point about Hackett being there as a first-time coach. And yeah, they could be slow to start. They could have issues with Seattle in week one, with all the hype. We talked about that before in our week one early picks video that we did a few weeks ago. And, who knows? I mean, Hackett does have Rodgers' endorsement, but hopefully he's not another Cliff Kingsbury or something. And but I doubt that. So, I think that won't preclude them from winning the Super Bowl. But you're right. It is a slight concern. Definitely not enough to keep me away from betting them. Speaking of teams with new head coaches, the Raiders, they have Josh McDaniels there, replacing John Gruden. So what do you think about the Raiders this year? Obviously people expect them to finish last in the division with this plus 609 odds, but they might be competitive. So would you be surprised if they made the playoffs?
I wouldn't be surprised if they made the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't finish. Well, I guess I would be surprised if they don't finish in last place, just because, that would mean one of the other teams in the division finished in last place. And I just don't foresee that happening, but injuries happen. So, if one of the quarterbacks goes down, and we're talking about Brett Rippon starting for the Denver Broncos, then, if they finish last, you'd be like, okay, that makes sense. But I think Josh McDaniels is going to do a good job with this team. I think he seems to be invested in Derek Carr. They got Devontae Adams, which is going to be a huge upgrade for that offense, because now they have three legit receiving options in Adams, Hunter Renfrow, who's just a third down target machine, and Darren Waller. I think the Adams acquisition helps him the most, because that's going to prevent teams from really game planning around, okay, we got to stop Darren Waller. Hunter Renfrow is not an impressive physical specimen, with all due respect to him. He's a smaller dude, so you can put guys on him. It's more of his route running ability that gets him open. But you can guard that with smaller corners. You just need to be able to have them run in that way. But Darren Waller's huge, and he's really physical. He's fast. He has all this stuff. So now he's going to be able to shake free a little more frequently because of Adams' presence. So I like it for that perspective. Their offensive line is still a concern, though. I mean, they may have made the right move in getting rid of Rodney Hudson, which, we wouldn't have anticipated that last year, but it seems like Hudson is close to retirement based off the news we heard earlier in this podcast. So we'll see if that ends up happening, but they still haven't fixed their problems there. I don't think that they have a particularly good interior with Jermaine Illuminor, Andre James, Denzel Good. They drafted Dylan Parham in the third round, so he'll probably earn one of the starting jobs. But I would prefer them to have added at least one veteran to help up there. But anyway, I'm splitting hairs on offense. Their passing game should be good. Their running game, we'll see. They've got a few talented dudes. Zamir White might end up being the best of them. Josh Jacobs kind of has been a little bit of a disappointment, but part of that is his blocking. Defensively, they look better than they were last year. They got Rocky Sin for Yannick Ngakoue, and they signed Chandler Jones. It's going to be a big upgrade to that pass rush across from Max Crosby. But there are still plenty of holes in this defense. The secondary, outside of Yasin, you have Trayvon Mullen, who's okay. Nate Hobbs, who was really good as a fifth-round rookie, but he has some off-the-field issues. So I think he might have been suspended for those last year. I can't remember. But there are just enough holes there. They have a couple good linebackers, but not great depth. Their defensive line is solid, but nothing overly special outside of Crosby and Jones, who I'm considering as more edge rush linebacker types. So I think that they're going to have to get really good play out of some of these veteran, I don't want to call them journeymen necessarily, but veteran role players, probably the best way to put it. And I'm not sure they're going to get that enough. I'm not sure their secondary is going to be quite good enough. They should still be solid, though. They should still have a winning record. As weird as that sounds, I think every team in this division has a winning record. I just think the Raiders are probably going to end up going 9-8. And maybe they go 8-9. So I guess they hover around 500 more, but I'm willing to say that they have a winning record. I think it's just going to take them some time to adjust to Josh McDaniels' leadership. But they have the pieces needed to compete in this division, which is saying a lot considering how talented it is.
Yeah, I think I like the Raiders more than you do. I think they can finish with 11 wins. As crazy as it sounds, like I think 11. I think all four teams could win 11 plus games in the division, which is crazy. Mentioned earlier, divisional games mean a little bit less these days with the 17th game. But there are two issues with the Raiders that are holding me back from saying they could make a Super Bowl run. I don't expect them to win the Super Bowl. Wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world because they have a lot of talent. But the two things are, as you said, first, the offensive line. It's just, I don't know. I mean, we'll see how Dylan Parham plays. The line wasn't that bad last year, but it was not very good. But I think that there are other skill position players may make up for it. I mean, Derek Carr has so many great players to throw to. You mentioned Waller, Adams, and Renfro. They also signed Demarcus Robinson, who made some plays in the Chiefs' offense in the past. So they have him as well. Keelan Cole, they also signed. He's made some good plays in the past, the Jaguars. So we'll see what happens with those other receivers. But they have a lot of great skill position players to make up for that bad offensive line. Zamir White has some upside, so they don't really have to rely on Josh Jacobs a lot. And it doesn't sound like they want to either. And the second concern I have is their schedule. I mean, they have to play these. Not only do they have to play these teams, they have so many other tough non-divisional games. So that could keep them from having a great record. Although I still think they could go 11-6 or better. I love the upgrades they made on defense as well. Chandler Jones, I mentioned him. Like, he's such a huge difference maker. Like, you look at Arizona with Jones and without Jones, it was night and day. And now you have him across from Max Crosby. Like, we were talking about Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. I mean, the Raiders with Max Crosby and Chandler Jones, like, that's as good as it gets. Like, their pass rush is going to be unbelievable. And so that could make up for some of their secondary issues. Although with Rock Ya-Sin, that's definitely, their secondary is going to be better with him. And at linebacker, you could maybe say that might be the weakest part. But I like Jayon Brown. I think he could be a nice fit for them. He's coming off a bad year because he was injured, but I think he can bounce back if he's healthy and really solidify the linebacking core. So, I like the Raiders a lot. It wouldn't surprise me if they made a run in the playoffs. But I like the other teams in the division more. If the Raiders were in, let's just say the NFC North or AFC South, or I guess NFC East, I would pick them to win the division. It's just like they're in the division with three other like juggernaut teams. So it's like as much as I like the Raiders, I think they're going to finish last in the division, which is just insane. It's crazy how good this division is.
Yeah, the Raiders have been screwed by their division this year. I feel bad for them because I agree with you. You put them in the AFC South, I think it's a no-brainer that they win that division. Like, they would be far and away better than any team there. And I agree with you. I like the defense. I look at the linebacker spot as a weakness, but they have like 5 guys that I look at and I'm like, oh, I kind of like this guy. I think my problem is, like, how do you string this together to find like 3 downs worth of production at 2 positions? But that might be me splitting hairs. I think that they can win double-digit games. If I liked another team in this division less than I do, I probably would say, hey, they could go 10-7 pretty easily. I think I'm probably to stick with the 9-8 projection. I just want to see how they respond to McDaniels too. The one concern I have about them with the new leadership in McDaniels, I think McDaniels is a great coach and he's going to be a great coach, especially, this is like 10, 12 years after his first head coaching stint in Denver. He has learned a lot since then. So I think he's going to be a much better coach this time around. His problem right now is he's not Rich Bisaccia. Rich Bisaccia did a really good job as an interim for the Raiders last year. And it sounded like the players wanted to keep him because they made that playoff run. And long-term, the move to McDaniels might be the right thing. But if there's any resistance off the bat, and not even like outward resistance, like we don't like McDaniels or anything, but just like any players that are like trying to adjust to his new program that are just kind of like not liking it as much as Bisaccia's, I think that could slightly impact them. That's reading a lot into it without any real information about it, though. So it's kind of like, we're just kind of throwing that out there as a possibility. But I'll be interested to see how they respond to him either way. I like him as a coach a lot. I like that he got Patrick Graham for that defense, but it's going to be an adjustment for the Raiders after the turmoil they went through last year and the way Bisaccia guided them through it. I wouldn't blame them if they had some reservations about Bisaccia going elsewhere.
Yeah, that's a good point. And if you're going to ding the Broncos for their new head coach, I think you could say the same thing about the Raiders. Although
True.
McDaniels has a head coaching experience, so it's not quite the same thing. Although there's still a learning curve with this new team. I should say, like I like McDaniels in Denver. I thought he did a good job as a head coach. The issue there was his personnel decision making. Like they for some reason allowed him to make all the decisions in the front office, which is kind of bizarre given that he was a first time head coach. It's not like he's been in the NFL.
This was one of the decisions.
There you go. Although 400 net yards in the playoffs against the Steelers. But yeah, definitely that and Richard Quinn in the second round, a blocking tight end. There were a lot of mishaps by the Denver front office under McDaniels, but I thought he did a good job of getting his team prepared to play every week. I thought he did a good job as a coach. So, he doesn't have the decision making here with the Raiders. So I like the Raiders of McDaniels. I think they're going to be good. I love all these teams. And again, we have the odds up on the screen. So if you're just listening, it's the Broncos plus 283, the Raiders plus 609, the Chargers plus 198, and the Chiefs at plus 168. Would you bet any of these?
Yeah, I think the one that I'd bet now is the Broncos at plus 283. I just think that's a great value. And I know we've said that, hey, they might start the year slow. They might take some time to gel. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure that their schedule after the Seahawks game, all of these schedules are tough, but I think the Broncos have an easier start to the year. I'm trying to check on that right now just to get you their opponents. So it starts with them on the road in Seattle. Then they play the Texans, the 49ers, and the Raiders. So, I mean, there are two tough games against the 49ers and Raiders, but the game against the 49ers is at home, which gives them an advantage. And the Texans aren't tough. So the Broncos start 2-0, and Russell Wilson looks really good in both games against two of the weaker teams in the NFL. These odds are going to drop. So I think you got to bet the Broncos now if you like them. Maybe you would get them better later in the season, but I think they're the way to go now. And then I would consider betting the Chargers and the Chiefs as well. But my advice on that, just bet whoever loses the week 2 game. I mean, they could easily win the division, both of them. So why not try to take advantage of, hey, who gets the loss first, who's looking worse out of the gate? If it's the Chiefs, feel free to bet them. They'll probably drop below to 2-1 odds there. And the Chargers, they lose, they'll probably go to plus 250-ish. So I think that's the way to approach it. I think you can make money off this division no matter what. But the Broncos would be the one I'd bet now, and I'd bet loser of Chargers Chiefs after week 2.
Yeah, I like that. I was about to say that. So it's not a surprise that we're thinking the same thing there. Denver is the one team I would bet now at plus 283. I think that's great value. They could easily win the division, as I said. Chargers plus 198, I think, is in second place. But I agree with what you said. Just bet the loser of the week 2 game, the Thursday night game. You're going to have a lot of time to bet it too, because you have a couple days before the Sunday slate in week 2. So you're going to get good team. You're going to get 2 good teams with value, that loser plus the Broncos. And you never know. I mean, maybe the winner of that game goes into a funk because they're going to be high off that win, and maybe they kind of slack off after that. They lose a couple of games, and then you're suddenly going to have 3 teams with plus value, better than plus 168, I should say. So you obviously want plus 200 or better with all 3 teams. So I think that definitely can happen, but just look out for value late in the year. I mean, even last year we had good value with the Chiefs. I think they were like plus 120 to win the division after their slow start. And I remember getting them at plus 120. I couldn't believe it. They were not they were favored, but they weren't like minus whatever. So we got them at plus money to win the division last year. So just, like that's what I would recommend with all these divisional bets. Just wait for good value, wait for a loss that people overreact to. The public overreacts to everything because of the media. The media will push if the loser of week 2 is going to be like, oh, is their season done? That's going to happen. So we're going to get great value no matter who loses that game. So we're definitely on the same page again.
Yeah, I think the best case scenario for us is the Chargers lose to the Chiefs in week 2 because they're on the road. Maybe the Chiefs just stop the Chargers, and people are like, assuming the Chargers win week 1 against the Raiders, because that's a huge revenge game and it's a home game for the Chargers, which, it doesn't matter that much, but from a travel perspective, that means at least a little something. But I think if you get to a situation where they like beat the Raiders by like a touchdown and then they lose to the Chiefs by like 20 plus points in Kansas City on a short week, I think teams or the public might be like, oh, the Chargers are a little fraudulent. Like the Chiefs are significantly better than them. That'll skew the odds. But then the Chargers after week 2, these are their 3 ensuing games. They play Jaguars again. They're at home against the Jaguars, on the road against the Texans. Those 2 are definite wins. I should hope at least. Don't want to
Rex Burkhead could go nuts again.
Don't want to jinx the Texans game again. But then the third game after that, they're on the road in Cleveland, which might be a tough game. But if Deshaun Watson is suspended, I mean, the Chargers will have the advantage in that at the quarterback position by a good margin. So they could hypothetically start 4-1, but if they go 1-1 and lose to the Chiefs in embarrassing fashion on a short week, people are going to think that they're not as good as they are. So I think that's probably our best case scenario.
Yeah, and the other side, if the Chiefs win, like in the scenario you're talking about, after that game they play the Colts, and I think they're going to beat the Colts. But after that, they play the Buccaneers, then the Raiders, then the Bills, then the Niners. That's pretty tough, and like they could lose a couple of those games, and suddenly people will be jumping off the bandwagon. So you might get a good number on them, even if they win week 2.
Yeah, this division is this is one you're going to want to check the betting odds every week, because you will be able to position yourself to make money. You might have to bet on 3 teams. You might end up with slim margins, but if you hedge properly, this could end up being a very lucrative division.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's it for our NFC West and AFC West previews. We're going to do the South teams next week. So with that in mind, do you have anything to plug?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Camenker. I'm not tweeting a ton of football these days. I've got a lot of golf stuff going on at Sporting News. They like to have me do golf betting in the off season, which is fun, but also frustrating when you get things wrong like I did last week. Promise this week's model will be a little bit better for the U.S. Open. I'll also be tweeting my thoughts about the Celtics as they proceed to blow the NBA Finals. So be on the lookout for my angry tweets about that. And if you have any football questions, tweet them my way or send them to me. I'll do my best to answer them if I see them. And I'll be doing some fantasy mocks and stuff in the upcoming weeks too. June's usually when I take a little football respite, but really the grind never fully ends. So we're good.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I can't wait to do this fantasy mocks. Maybe we'll do them after the previews. And I feel like after July 4th is when you really want to start getting into fantasy. So we could do that then. I'm at walterfootball.com. Season previews officially start on Thursday. So we're going to start with the AFC West and then NFC West, etc. So we're going to go through all 8 divisions. And then I'm going to have my Super Bowl 57 winner projections. So look out for that. Also, Charlie Campbell is posting tons of draft content, awesome content as usual. We've updated our power rankings. I posted a week 1 pick against the spread already that I locked in. We talked about that in the show a few weeks ago, but I love this pick. I would bet it now before the line rises. So check that out as well. And then fantasy rankings will be updated tomorrow too. So check that out if you want to get an early start in fantasy. So yeah, I'll talk to you next week about the South teams.
All right. Sounds good. Talk to you then.